Conflict is inevitable in life. Some people go to extremes to avoid it. Others are energized by it. Sometimes, conflict can lead to the death of a relationship. Is it possible to confront without offending? Today on Excellent Living, best-selling author Deborah Pegues says yes, and she provides tools for handling some of the most delicate situations. Deborah Pegues is a certified behavioral consultant and the author of several books including 30 Days to Taming Your Tongue, Supreme Confidence, and Confronting Without Offending. Cheryl starts the conversation with one misperception about healthy relationships.
Deborah, it's a fact of life that we all experience conflict in our lives, but some people actually believe it's the sign of a healthy relationship if there is little or no conflict. Do you agree?
No, I think that's the sign of an unhealthy relationship because conflict is inevitable because we're not all carbon copies of each other. So we're going to conflict. And the really big issue is not to run away from it, but to learn how to confront it. And that's what I really get a lot of joy in talking about is how do we go about confronting the issues when people have either offended us or we suspect we've offended somebody. Or there's just been a divergence of expectations and the issues of life.
Should we confront people every time they offend us?
No, what you want to confront really is patterns, a pattern of behavior that you don't want to see continue. So then you want to stop and say, let's come together. And I really want to define what I mean by confronting because the word confrontation is what I really enjoy talking about. It really means coming together face to face. So there's no hostility in it. It's just that that's one of the words that's gotten a bad rap because of how we use it. But I want to make that clear that we're not talking about a hostile in your face confrontation. We're just talking about sitting with somebody and coming together and saying, your behavior is negatively impacting me and I need to see a change.
Give me an example, Deborah, of a legitimate reason to confront someone.
Well, I had a guy who came into my office once and he called me what he thought was a pet name. He offered me chocolate and I said, oh yes, I like some. And then the next day he said, hello, chocolate. Well, I knew somehow or another he was referring to my complexion since I'm a deeply pigmented person. And I said, well, I would just prefer you to call me Deborah. Well, if I hadn't said anything, I could have just sat there and fumed and fretted, which most people do because they don't know how a person is going to respond to a, quote, confrontation. So I just thought I'd better nip it in the bud at the beginning because it was unfair to him for me to let him do that and he not know that I was offended by that.
Because it was not his intention to offend you.
I'm totally convinced that most people who offend us, they weren't trying to do so. And so that's what we always have to give a person the benefit of the doubt because really, we all have our history. We all have things that we're sensitive about. And a person may not know that and they may just press one of those sensitive buttons and we just, we have to be able to tell the person, I'm uncomfortable with that or I'm offended by it or I know you don't mean anything, but I'm just one of my little sensitivities. And I always put the responsibility on me. I say, I'm just kind of quirky like that. I have principles in my head that I use for when I want to confront something. I believe it has to be done promptly because the longer the space of time from the time of an offense until you confront it, it's just the gap grows wider. So I try to have very narrow gaps in my relationships like that. So I'll want to ask, I just wanted him to know right away. Since it was, I needed to keep it lighthearted. And so I just chose that moment because if I had waited until the next day and say, oh, wait a minute, you said that yesterday. Now this isn't working. So I'll just, I jokingly said, I just need you to call me Deborah, and just kind of kept it at that rather than lecturing him. So it's important to me because I have about 5 principles that I use. They all start with the letter P. And one of them is promptly. A confrontation has to happen promptly. And that's what I did.
Would you share the other principles?
Sure. It has to be done personally. One of the reasons I wrote the book is I was tired of people confronting other people or telling another person about an offense. For instance, if Patty is upset with Susie, she tells Betty. So I thought, why do people triangulate? Why don't they just go to the person and say, I'm bothered by that?
Why do they do that?
Because we don't know how the person is going to respond. They may alienate us for the rest of our lives. And most of us fear alienation so much until we just rather keep quiet for peace sake. The problem is that we don't have the peace. We have the inner turmoil. So I say peace sake is when everybody has it. So I'm not going to keep quiet. And that's a principle that has been taught perhaps in the church. After all, Jesus never said a mumbling word when he was going to the cross. And so we think that this suffering and silence, when in fact, it's what causes resentment It really does. And so I don't want that in my life. And so I know that the best way is to deal with the conflict personally. And then you asked me about the others. Well, and privately. You know, you never confront somebody in the presence of another, because then that person is just going to try to save face. So I have to do it promptly, personally, privately, and then purposefully. What is the goal of the confrontation? If I'm going to do it purposefully, what is my purpose? And I should always have a goal. And the goal should not be just to get something off my chest or to let you know that I am not the one that you can do that to. It has to be to achieve unity, or just to get an understanding, or to stop some bad behavior to start some good behavior, whatever. But it has to be done purposefully. So at the end of the day, at the end of the conversation, you have to ask yourself, what do I want to happen? What behavior do I want to see changed? And then, of course, it has to be done peacefully. That means you're going to think about it a second. You know, I'm really one for writing a script. I'll just kind of jot down the key words I want to say. And if I don't have that opportunity, but for instance, in that situation that I told you about, I'll just think about it, that I don't have to be hostile at all, because confrontation by definition has no hostility. So I'll just take a deep breath and, you know, collect my thoughts, because I know in our brains, if the emotional side is high, the rational side is low. So I try to make sure my rational side stays pretty high. And so I'll just do it peacefully, you know, just very calmly. Just, you know, state whatever it is I want to state.
Would another P for Christians, Deborah, be prayerfully for a person to ask the Lord in advance, what is the best way to approach it? I say, so there will be no zing in it, or also at the right time?
Absolutely, and I usually use that P for prayerfully, and not just today. I thought I'd use 5.
Okay.
But the truth of the matter is I always use Isaiah 50:4. It says, the Lord God has given me the tongue of the learned, that I should know how to speak a word in season. So I'll just say, God, give me the learned, meaning skilled in a certain discipline, not having knowledge gained. But I say, okay, God, give me your words, because I understand from the scriptures that your words don't return void, but they prosper, they achieve the purpose where you send them. So I say, God, give me your words so that the purpose of this confrontation can be achieved. And so prayerfully is probably more important than all the others that I said.
What if you follow all 5 Ps and the person that you confront is quite offended, their voice escalates, and they're very angry as a result of your confrontation?
Well, if that happens, you've done your job. You see, when the scriptures tell us in Matthew 18:15, if your brother trespass against you, go and tell him his fault. It doesn't say, and he will probably respond well. It says, if he shall hear you, you have gained your brother. That's a big if, because there's a good chance he won't hear you. He won't get the purpose. And so he may become offended. But you've done your job. You've obeyed God. And that's what I always say. It's not my responsibility to determine the person's reaction. I've obeyed God. I've kept this thing peacefully, prayerfully, privately. You know, all the things that I know to do. I've used all the wisdom that I can muster.
And what if the person says, oh, you're just a sensitive person, or, you know, you're the one with the problem? Should you then repeat your concerns about the offense, or should you just be silent and let it go?
No, and when I say no, don't let it go, but don't try to convince somebody, because there's a saying that a person convinced against his will is still believes what he believes, whatever the saying goes. So I wouldn't try to convince somebody to think differently. I would just tell them the behavior that I need to see changed as it relates to me, because I'm not trying to change your character, really. I'm trying to change what you do as it relates to me.
I'll give you an example. Let's say a married couple. The husband embarrasses the wife in public on a regular basis. Let's say he speaks to her in a demeaning tone. This bothers her. Other people see it. What if she confronts him and says, this really bothers me that, you know, in public, you speak to me in a particular way that I find offensive? And he says, hey, that's your problem.
And then that's where you have boundaries with consequences. You say, okay, I'm asking you not to do that, and the very next time that happens, I'm not gonna stand there and allow it to happen. I'm just gonna immediately leave. I'm not sure if that will embarrass you or not, but I won't stand there and allow myself to be embarrassed. So I'm just gonna immediately leave the environment. I just need you to know I'm gonna do that, and then do it.
So you're saying she doesn't have to respond in kind, putting him down with a cutting remark, but in other words, she's letting him know, if you do that again, I will immediately get up and walk out.
Absolutely, and you just made a good point, because if you respond in kind, that's ungodly. See, that's the difference between confrontation and retaliation. Because when Jesus talked about the fact that we don't have to go eye for an eye, or, you know, if your brother trespasses against you, whatever, he's talking about, when he says turn the other cheek, he's not talking about, what he's saying is don't retaliate, which means return the punishment. Don't return the punishment. But see, confrontation is godly. So when you have boundaries with consequences to say, okay, this is what's going to happen next time, and you just quietly do it. And you can say, well, listen, if that's how you choose to communicate, I'm going to leave, or just leave the environment. Consequences. Boundaries must have consequences, or they're just wishes. You can just wish a person would stop doing something, and that person never stops. Then you just have, those are just wishes. Boundaries without consequences are just wishes.
So you're saying you can't control what the other person does. You can only control what you do.
And
all of this you're saying is still Christian.
It's still Christian. God has boundaries. God has boundaries. All souls are mine. The soul that sins, it's going to die. Boundary, consequences.
That's a big boundary.
God has big boundaries.
And he's very clear.
Jesus had boundaries. When the young rich ruler says, I want to go with you, and Jesus said, sell all you have. And he said, I don't want to do that. I have too much. And Jesus was like, okay, then you're not coming with me. I mean, he could have said, well, can you just sell part of it? Can you just kind of compromise a little bit? You have to have boundaries with consequences. That doesn't mean you're going to be mean, but you have to have consequences so that people know that this behavior won't be tolerated, because we teach people how to treat us by what we tolerate.
Isn't there the consequence that when we let things fester, there is a greater chance it is going to be something said in anger? Because a lot of arguments, you're really talking about something that's an undercurrent that has maybe never been dealt with, and you never got it out, and so it may come out a year later, 2 years later. You're confronting about one thing, but really it's something that has never been resolved.
That's why you have to resolve it quickly, because in the book of Hebrews it talks about the fact that you need to be aware of your behavior lest a root of bitterness spring up in you. Well, when you have anger that's unresolved, that's called resentment. And my definition is that resentment is unresolved anger that has been resent to the inside. You don't need to resent it. You need to put it on the table, because the only things that take root are things underneath the surface. Think about that. In nature, the things that take root are things underneath the surface. So when you put your feelings, your hurts underneath the surface, you just don't talk about it, you swallow it. Well, it's buried alive, because anger is buried alive, and it's going to manifest some kind of way. You're going to shop too much, or eat too much, or do something. You're going to always have a headache when your husband wants to be intimate. Something's going to happen. So that's why you need to just put it on the table. And my whole purpose in writing my book was to say, this is how you put it on the table. You don't attack character. You just stick to the behavior. You stick to that issue there. You don't bring in all the other issues.
You don't attack the person.
You never attack the person or his judgment. You just talk about the behavior that's affecting you. And I grew up in an environment where people didn't do that, so I'm pretty adamant about that.
You also say in your book that if you allow yourself to get stuck in an offense, your relationship with the offender can never be the same. Really?
Because it's this big hump in the carpet. If you've ever had a big hump in the carpet that you trip over, you got to move that. I like it when David told his brothers, it was Jephthah in this story, where he was cast out by his brothers, and they came to him later because they needed somebody to lead the army, and by then he had gotten a reputation for being a great leader. And they said, come, lead our army. And he said, wait a minute. Didn't you hate me and cast me out? Why are you coming to me now? It's like, don't jump over that. That's still there for me. Don't try to ignore our history, because you just need me now to use me. But I need to talk about the fact that you guys cast me out, and you thrust me out because I was a half brother. So you got to deal with that. It doesn't go away. It's going to always be there in the back of your mind if you don't talk it through.
How to effectively confront without attacking, positive steps to resolving conflict. That's the topic today on Excellent Living with Cheryl Martin. Our guest is certified behavioral consultant and best-selling author Deborah Pegues. Deborah's books include 30 Days to Taming Your Tongue, 30 Days to Taming Your Finances, and Confronting Without Offending. To learn more about this program, just visit our website, excellentliving.org. That's excellentliving.org. Let's return to the conversation.
Sometimes people aren't even aware that maybe the way they laughed at you or joked at your expense, that it offended you. And I'm wondering in those cases, if those are cases sometimes really to take to the Lord, especially if you go to the person, they're clueless. First of all, they don't remember it.
Absolutely.
And maybe it's the person's own sensitivity.
Well, and that's why you go to God. In fact, there's a proverb that says a man's wisdom gives him patience, and it is to his glory to overlook an offense. You see, and is the operative word. Again, you want to confront behavior that you don't want to become a pattern. Now, if it's something of the past, then, if you just need to go to God sometimes and get the grace to say, I release that. So that's why I tell everybody, don't confront every offense. I had an example last week. Someone came to me and said, I'm living with my mother-in-law, and I had made all my food for the week, and she invited her friends over, and they ate up all the food. But he has to live in that house for now. And I thought, should he confront this? She's not the type that engages in, really intelligent conversation. Let me just say that honestly. So I know that wouldn't work with her. So I said, listen, why don't you just take steps to change your behavior so that doesn't happen again. So next time you make all your food, why don't you seal it and freeze it so that it's not available? See, sometimes you're going to have to control your own environment so certain things don't recur. Well, next time, you get some freezer bags and you store it and you just, put it in your bag and write your name on it.
Talk about the different styles of confronting.
Well, in the book, Cheryl, I talk about 4 styles. I call one the accommodator, the dictator,
the abdicator,
and the collaborator.
Okay.
And the dictator is the one who says, I want it my way. I win, you lose. And none of these styles are exclusively good or exclusively bad. For instance, there is a time to dictate. When moral values are at stake or the good of the whole is at stake, sometimes you're going to have to dictate. You're going to have to say, no, this is how it's going to go down. You will not bring drugs into my house or whatever. Then, of course, the accommodator, which I just feel like is one of the worst, but we see it most frequently in church, is the one that says, oh, I just have it your way. Just don't lose relationship with me. Just I'll accommodate you. You win, I lose. That's not good. That's not good. And in fact, Burger King has that as a slogan, have it your way. Well, that's not good. And so Aaron was like that. And because of his accommodating the people when Moses went up to the mountain and they said, make us a god because Moses isn't coming back. Well, when you listen and you read the story, he never protested. They said, make us a god because Moses isn't coming back. He says, give me your jewelry. See, he had to accommodate them. So that's another whole seminar. And then, of course, we have the abdicator who doesn't say. That's what that word abdicate means, doesn't say. He just runs away. He doesn't say what's wrong. That's sulking and pouting. That's so passive aggressive. I'm really upset with something, but I'm not going to say anything.
What's wrong? Nothing.
Nothing. You see, and that's what happened with the prodigal son's brother. When they had the party for him and he's out sulking and the father says, what's wrong with you? And what I like about that story is that the father didn't cancel the party because you can't tolerate an abdicator. You can't teach them that that's how to get attention and results. And then, of course, is the collaborator. I love that one because it says, I win, you win. I care about you, but I care about me as well. So let's find a way. Let's win together. That's what that's about. So those are the styles. And most of us will find ourselves somewhere on the continuum, and sometimes even the situation dictates which style you'll resort to.
So you wouldn't say there's one that is the best. Would it be the collaborator?
Well, I think collaboration is always better because, win-win, just like the daughters of Zelophehad in Numbers when they said, listen, our father died and, you're divvying up the land, but there's no provision for us. We don't have a father. We don't have a husband. We don't have brothers. We have no men in our lives that would make sure that we get a part of the land. So they said, give us a portion that our uncles would have had. Our father died. And I thought that was great because Moses said, listen, he took the case to God, and God says, yeah, they're right. You should give them some land.
What role does tone play when you are confronting someone?
Tone is more important than words. In fact, I saw a pie chart recently that said words account for 7%, especially in interpersonal conflict, and tone accounts for 45%. Wow. Yes. And then body language is the remainder. But tone is that attitude with which you say it. Because I can say okay, or I can say okay. So you got to watch your tone, and you got to be sensitive to that. That's why you can't confront somebody without the Spirit of God. You can't just decide in your own self that this is what I'm going to say. You got to think about it. You got to think about the Spirit, because tone really is, in my head, equivalent to saying the Spirit in which you approach somebody. So you got to watch that so that it's not accusatory, it's not judgmental, it's just seeking first to understand. That's what the tone has to be. I'm seeking first to understand.
Timing,
again, it has to be prompt if possible, but not in front of anybody. You want to do it, but there's a time for everything. The Bible says that in Ecclesiastes. Time to keep silent, a time to confront, time to talk, time to be quiet. So sometimes the timing has to be, especially if a person is busy, like when your husband comes home, he puts his briefcase down and you light right in on the problems, like, nope, not good. So it always has to be a time when the person is receptive to input. And if you don't know that person, usually the people we're going to confront, though, is because of some issue that may have happened or whatever. Then you just got to say, okay, is this the best time for that person to receive this information?
How important is the skill of listening?
Oh, listen. Silent and listen, same letters. Same letters, spell silent,
Wow.
spell listen. And sometimes we don't know how to do that, so I have everybody practice. I'll say, just wait 5 seconds. Do you know how long 5 seconds is? Let me show you how long 5 seconds is. Most of the times when we're talking, we're in a confrontation or whatever, having a confrontation, the negative type, we're not listening. All we're doing is reloading our guns so that we have our ammo ready. But if when the person makes his last statement, you don't say a thing, you just look them in the eye and you shake and you nod your head and you wait 5 seconds. That's a long time. And you say, I hear you. That doesn't say I agree with you, or it doesn't say any of that. It doesn't even mean I understand you. It's I hear you. Because the most significant thing you do in a confrontation is to let that person know that he is being heard. Because when a person feels like he's being heard, or you're making an attempt to understand, you're like halfway there in terms of resolving the conflict.
I was going to ask you that. What is the role of the person who is being confronted? Because they may interpret what the person is saying as criticism and then begin to shut down. So how should the person on the receiving end respond?
Always seeking to understand. Ask the question. Repeat the question. So you thought that I did that because of this. So you thought I was inconsiderate. But that's why the person who is actually conducting the confrontation can't make judgmental statements. You can't say, that was so inconsiderate of you. You may have said, it doesn't appear that you thought that through. But I can't attack your character and your judgment. So that's why it's important for the confronter to set a tone that says, I'm willing to hear you as well. So you don't make those judgmental type statements.
What is some parting advice you would give our listeners that would help them minimize conflicts in their lives?
Well, to set boundaries up front. I've done a lot of this in recent days. That every conflict I've dealt with in the last few days, people could have set boundaries up front.
And you tell the people
Yes.
that these are your boundaries?
Yes, you tell
even
them.
before conflict occurs?
Absolutely. Especially, let's say, if somebody's going to move into your house. I have a thing in my guest room. I may have taken it down recently, but so I can do a new sign. But basically, I put the house rules, because it's the worst thing to make rules in the middle of the game. Like, oh, don't call my house after 11. Well, people need to know that that's not good to call your house after 11 or after 10 or whatever your boundary is. So you need to be able to tell them, or if you use my car, this is what I require. That kind of thing. Just, you don't have to say rule, but we always do this. When you leave my house, just set the alarm, or don't set the alarm, or whatever. You do it in a way that just says, these are some guidelines that would help us so we can kind of not stumble over each other and make your visit pleasant.
And you would even suggest that for dating couples, for example, wouldn't you?
Oh, for sure. If you're going to be late, just call me, since I tend to budget my life by the minute. I'm just quirky like that. Just call me, and if you're going to be late, it's okay to call me. Or don't come early. I don't tend to run early. It's just you put the onus on you. See what I'm saying? But you just let them know that this is what it is. This is who I am. And you'll see, it's not one-sided. You'll say, tell me some things you'd like to see. I'll ask people in a minute, tell me what some of your pet peeves. And they'll say, oh, none. And then the minute you get on one of them, they go quiet. It's like, that is immature. I can tell when somebody goes quiet, I know that person is not operating in the way Jesus said it. He said, if your brother trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault. In Luke 17:3, it says, if your brother trespass against you, rebuke him. That means tell him to stop. And Cheryl, it's in the red letters in the Bible. That means Jesus said it. He says, rebuke him. Tell him to stop. And all I'm saying today is there's a way to tell him. You want to get God's words. He has given us the tongue of the learned, that we should know how to speak a word in season. And his words don't return void, but they prosper where he sends them, and it accomplishes his purpose.
Great. Any other parting thoughts or suggestions?
Well, I just suggest that you do it. Don't wait. Again, remember those 5 P's: to do it personally. Don't tell someone who can't impact the situation. Tell the person. Do it privately. Do it promptly. Do it purposefully, do it peacefully, and for sure, do it prayerfully.
Our guest on Excellent Living today, Bible teacher and best-selling author Deborah Pegues. She provided great insights as well as practical steps for handling conflict wisely. Deborah is a certified behavioral consultant and has written several books including Confronting Without Offending, 30 Days to Taming Your Tongue, and Supreme Confidence. Her conversation with Cheryl is a great resource to review from time to time. You can order a CD copy when you visit our website, excellentliving.org. That's excellentliving.org. Click on Resources and select the title Resolving Conflict. While on the homepage, you can also sign up for our free quarterly online newsletter. If you need some prayer encouragement to lovingly confront the conflict in your life, our counselors can help by joining you in prayer. Just call 832-766-1695. That's 832-766-1695. Or email us at prayer@excellentliving.org. That's prayer@excellentliving.org. In prayer, we can gain the wisdom and knowledge to resolve any misunderstanding. We invite you to play a vital role in this outreach ministry by supporting this broadcast with your prayers and financial gifts. The amount is up to you. To partner with us, you can donate online when you visit excellentliving.org, or you can send your check or money order to Excellent Living, Post Office Box 15285, Chevy Chase, Maryland 20825. That's Excellent Living, P.O. Box 15285, Chevy, that's spelled Chevy, Chase, Chase, Maryland 20825. Thanks so much. Next time on Excellent Living, our relationship coach Johnny Parker joins Cheryl Martin for his monthly visit. I'm Doris McMillan, reminding you that excellent living is doing life God's way because His way is perfect. Is perfect. Is perfect. Is perfect.